introduction, Bianca. As she said, my name is Madison Christmas. I am the Program Associate of Investment and Growth here at CTIP, and I'm honored to introduce our fourth and final panel of the afternoon, Investing in Pediatrics. And as our director, Dr. Espinoza, perfectly teed us up, this financial component and really honing in on it is truly essential, if not the most critical aspect of truly achieving equity in pediatric innovation. So I hope that through this conversation, we can, as investors, as founders, as advocates, understand better how we can truly capitalize on and support the innovation in this space. So with that, I'd like to give the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. They'll say their name, what firm they're representing, and a little bit about what brought them to the panel today. So we can start to my left with Andrew.
Oh, great. Thank you for having me, Madison. My name is Andrew Meadow. I'm a partner and chief investment officer for Health Innovation Capital. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Juan since his days at Children's Hospital of LA, and knew I was in the presence of somebody special after our first conversation. So I am what I call vice president of Juan's fan club. But more importantly, we are a fund that focuses exclusively on pediatric health and women's health as an investment thesis. And so for me not to be here would have been a bad thing. So I'm honored to have the privilege to be here with not just you, Madison, but this great group here.
Hi, guys. I'm Catherine Cooper. I'm an investment advisor at CTIP. I've been with CTIP since, I guess, what we call CTIP 1.0, so a couple grant cycles ago. I was co-director of CTIP for 5 years, along with Dr. Espinoza and Dr. Brett Cohen. Now I've just switched to an advisor role. Specifically, I focus on our portfolio companies around fundraising and kind of the capital environments. Because my other hat is I'm a partner at a venture fund, Jumpstart Nova, that invests in seed and Series A stage healthcare companies. So it's been great. CTIP has a portfolio of over 150 companies. We are very, very deep in the pediatric med device space. Everybody is from, early to some of the founders that you saw present in the panel before us. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'll kick it off to first on my left.
Thank you. I'm Dave Kariakis. I think I'm Madison, you might need to confirm this, the newest member to the investment advisory board of CTIP. So very excited to be here and be part of it. And thanks for all the great work you all are doing. I've been investing in healthcare for over a decade. I'm a managing partner with Wyndham Capital Partners. We invest in medical devices, software, digital health, and the convergence of all of those technologies. Over my career, I've been fortunate to back a long list of really incredible entrepreneurs, but specifically have an impact on how pediatrics in medical devices and in pediatrics and labor and delivery with software investment. So really excited to be here and feel it's an obligation that we have to innovate in this space. So.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Donna Sun, and I'm a principal at the Laerdal Million Lives Fund. And we are an early stage healthcare venture fund where it's all about backing life-saving technologies. And our mission, separate from achieving outsized financial returns, is to help save 1 million lives or more per year by 2030. And as part of that mandate, maternal and infant health is a really big piece of that, especially from a global health perspective. That mortality burden is just massive. So similar to what everyone is mentioning here, to not be a part of this will be a huge miss on us as well. So, and we spent a lot of time within medical devices overall. And that my prior fund, I invested in both a NICU software solution and a liquid biopsy company focused on the autism space. So have spent a lot of time within pediatrics overall.
Alex, you can go ahead now.
Thanks, Madison. Hi, everyone. Alex Shandes. Great to join you all. Unfortunately, I'm in Denver, so I'm not there in person, but excited to be a part of this fantastic panel. I am a senior associate with Kaiser Permanente Ventures, and we are one of the older, longstanding corporate venture funds. And as you can imagine, we invest on behalf of, excuse me, any and all health concerns for clinicians and patients across the value chain at Kaiser and beyond. And one of those focus is women's health, pediatrics, and all of the confluence therein. And I'm excited to be joining the panel today and representing Kaiser, and also having spent time with CTIP, Catherine and Juan and the team, Madison included, as a MBA support role for about a year. And as a mom of three and the parent to a child with a medical condition, have a lot of passion for this space and how important it is. So looking forward to today.
Thank you for that, Alex. So as you all can see, we have truly a great lineup of panelists here. So let's dive into the discussion. So in the beginning of the programming, Dr. Espinoza gave us a lot of facts about the state of pediatric innovation and how it clearly lags behind adults. So I'm going to give you all one more statistic. Research by the FDA in 2018 revealed that novel pediatric devices number only a quarter of those of adults. Further, the majority of devices on the market for pediatrics typically are only addressing the needs of patients that are 18 years or older. And it's important to know that pediatrics is defined as anyone under the age of 21. So this goes to show that a lot of pediatric patients are not being served by pediatric medical devices. On the bright side, this means that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation and investment in this space. So I want to start the conversation there and thinking about the opportunity. So Andrew, you and your team at Health Innovation Capital have done a lot of research into the pediatric landscape and what has sort of driven this market. So what are the emerging trends and innovations in this space? What's driving them, and what is there for investors to be excited about right now?
Right. So I have seen Dr. Espinoza's presentation in terms of the horrific looking details and economic numbers for the better part of 4 years, just not given by Juan, just given by multiple people over time. And historically, I'm a glass half empty type of person, but when it comes to pediatrics, I feel like we have hit a unique crossroads in the life cycle of pediatric health innovation. And part of it, I think, has to come from the fact that we had nowhere to go but up, particularly in 2006, 2007. And due to changes in the regulatory environment, which then was followed by changes in the reimbursement market, we have been seeing a number of very compelling technologies not only go to market, but also enter the publicly trading markets in the form of day one pharmaceuticals, for example. And what is exciting about this is that this trend has been going on for a while. It's just that people don't realize it or see it or acknowledge it. You know, our fund is based in Boston, and people oftentimes ask, who are the anchor companies in Boston? And oddly enough, one of those anchor companies is a small company, and I say this in quotation marks, Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Vertex Pharmaceuticals was created to focus on cystic fibrosis, and cystic fibrosis was its second initiative. The first one was Hep C, and they made a mess of that effort, so they went after cystic fibrosis. It is literally the only product that is revenue generating for Vertex right now, but yet pediatrics is a bad place to put money. I don't know. I've been looking at trends like this. This is from our presentation that we give to investors who oftentimes say that pediatrics is a bad place to invest. But we've been seeing the trend over the last 7 years of where the regulatory environment has been going and where the payer environment has been going. And we have been seeing reimbursement numbers go up for new products that are being launched. I mean, most recently, earlier this year, a product approved by Novartis, focusing on sickle cell anemia, was approved for just over $2.3 million per course of treatment. And that, when I say approved, not approved just by the FDA, but the payers have agreed that that is the price that they are willing to reimburse that treatment for. And that is a huge, huge situation, because that now sets kind of should I say, a base point where other products can be priced as well. The other thing is that there are a lot of incentives to motivate companies to get into pediatrics, which people don't fully appreciate and understand. And so our team has spent the better part of 2 years understanding the intricacies of how to engage with, for example, the voucher program, which unfortunately is scheduled to come to an end in September. And I am hoping and praying that the government will extend that, because that is a huge, huge windfall for those who are able to receive that benefit. Then you've got the orphan disease designation and compassionate use designation as well. So there's a lot of, and there's incentives associated with that. And if you want to know what they are, we can talk about it. But those things have led to some of the advantages that have taken place under the Obama administration and the Trump administration that has made it more efficient and more effective for pediatric products to go to market. So, which begs the question, then why are not more products going to market? And I do have to say that that valley of death, I don't think it's really so much a valley of death. I think it's the better products that are out there that we are starting to see. There is funding out there. It's making sure that the right company is being matched with the right partner, and making sure that your message is resonating with the right audience. When we get presented with companies focusing on Alzheimer's, for example, our first words out of our mouth are, "We are not the right partner for you. Let us put you in touch with the right partner." And when we get a phone call from Versant or some other fund saying this is a product in pediatrics, we're glad to take that. And so I think this is a effort that is not for the meek. You got to really want this to win it. You got to be in it to win it, so to speak. So
Thank you for that, Andrew. It just really goes to show how interrelated all of these sectors are, and how regardless of where you sit in the ecosystem, it's important to pay attention to the regulatory landscape, the political landscape, the social landscape, and how all these things come into play. And it's the importance of opportunities like this to all come together for knowledge exchange, to understand how all these things work together and are really driving this industry. So we've been talking a lot about the valley of death today. So I want to dive a bit further into that, and understand why that might be the case for pediatrics. So pediatric patients, as we know, comprise a smaller market opportunity than typically desired by VCs. And the companies that do progress to commercial use oftentimes face a very variable reimbursement or market landscapes. So, on the investment side, what keeps early stage investors away from pediatric solutions? And keeping all these things in mind, how can founders be proactive about addressing some of these hesitancies? So, I'd love to send this question to Alex to start.
Thanks, Madison. I will say, I think in the last 2 years, there's been a gradual transition towards more interest around pediatric investing. And I do think, to Andrew's point, it's come from some of the regulatory changes that we've seen. But by and large, as you mentioned, Madison, a lot of later stage to mid stage investors are looking for that commercial traction. And early stage investors are looking for some of that extensibility. Can that product start here in one disease state and then translate into the adult population? How do we make that return on investment worthwhile for that upfront risk? And at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of different funds out there. There's corporate funds, there are funds that are institutional based. And I think for pediatric innovators, what is most critical, and Andrew mentioned this too, is finding that right partner that has an understanding for what it's going to take for that company to reach its apex, and some of the hurdles that will come alongside that growth trajectory, to make it worthwhile. I know some of the companies we've invested in at Kaiser Permanente, for example, Genome Medical, counsels and looks at rare genetic diseases and how to connect patients with a unique genome profile to a pharmaceutical trial more quickly, more rapidly, more expediently. And so we were a great partner for them because we have access to patients and data. And then we also have the ability to educate from a clinical perspective as to why genetic counseling could be really important, viable, helpful. And so I think it's finding that right partner, Madison. And then I also think, allowing these pediatric innovators to, I think the best way to say this is to stand in their brilliance. I mean, a lot of these innovators don't, I think, get the recognition for what they've built and how imperative it can be and how influential it can be for some of the outcomes later in life. And I'll give another example, which is patients who are diagnosed early with cerebral palsy have intervention earlier, and as such have fewer interventions later in life, and that cost of care goes down significantly. I think there's a lack of understanding from the payer side, and in some cases for the reimbursement side, as to how impactful it can be to get that diagnosis early and what that means later. So those are just a few thoughts I have, but I'd love to share the floor with Catherine because I know she's got incredible wisdom in this space as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alex, and really harping on the importance of finding a good partner. And when thinking about strategies, I think that the non-dilutive and public funding opportunities can really also come into play here. So, Catherine, if you'd be willing to sort of speak on the value of organizations like CTIP and these types of opportunities for de-risking.
Thanks, Madison. So, I mean, free money is always lovely. And I say free money in the sense that we're talking about non-dilutive capital or grants. So CTIP invests in pediatric medical device companies through non-dilutive capital or grants via CTIP because we are funded by a grant from the FDA. But the scope of government funding for actually really any healthcare company is fairly vast, whether it's SBIR, STTR grants, NSF grants, Air Force grants, et cetera. And so what's something that we really take advantage of at CTIP is connecting our portfolio companies with these types of resources. And I don't mean connecting them to, let's say, the website where you could submit because we all have the internet, but in fact, connecting them with grant writers or someone who can help them translate. If you're not in academia and grant writing is not your area of expertise, how do we say, this is what I'm innovating in, and this is why it's applicable, and I deserve an SBI or STTR grants. CTIP portfolio companies have now been awarded upwards of either 10 or 15 million in non-dilutive capital sources outside of CTIP. So it is very, very effective. It's the equivalent to some companies pre-seed or seed rounds. And, back to what Madison and Alex were talking about, right? How do you show traction before you have traction, right? What's the chicken and egg scenario? How do I say I'm going to be successful and someone's going to invest in me without someone actually investing in you? And this is not unique to pediatrics. This is something that any early stage company would face, whether they're trying to raise venture funding, other types of outside capital, connecting with corporate partners, et cetera. And so having a source like the government that's not taking equity in your company can help validate that they are still, an investor. They're not on your cap table in the traditional sense, but you raised $300,000, $2 million from them, and then you can continue to innovate and get to those milestones that our outside investors might think are valuable in order to take that risk, and you've now kind of de-risked that investment for them.
Thank you for that, Catherine. So now I want us to talk about what about the companies that do make it past this valley of death and are approved to be on the market? The fight is not over yet. There are significant challenges when it comes to sales and reimbursement, customer discovery. So I would love us to dive into that a little bit more. So David, I'm going to pass it to you to talk a bit about your experience with building strong sales teams and go-to-market strategies for some of these companies that are trying to break into the market.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'll try and be brief because I know we're running out of time. I want to hear what Donna has to say, the brilliance that you have too. So an example, I led an investment in a company called Just Right Surgical. We later changed the name to Boulder Surgical. It's a miniaturized surgical sealer and stapler for pediatrics specifically. Building off of what was just shared previously, you don't have to. It benefits you to be creative. We ended up selling and licensing the rights to the technology to Intuitive in robotics and leveraging the interest that they had to provide over 50 million in non-dilutive funding to build our sales and marketing team at Boulder to then build the R&D to help reconfigure it into adult and grow that space. I wrote the investment memo originally acknowledging it was a $50-75 million market opportunity, which I was exaggerating a little bit to get my partners to do it knowingly, because in reality, it was probably smaller than that. But this was a technology that was saving lives and it had to be invested in. And being able to leverage that non-dilutive capital helps, particularly when there's only one customer in a metro. And that's one of the challenges that PEDS has, right? You call on Lori here, and then you have to drive 2 or 3 hours to the next city to call in the next hospital. And it's a physician group that doesn't, it may be a little more reluctant to try new things, and rightfully so. You don't want your first time using it to be on a 2-year-old or a neonate. So you have to build the data set, but you can't build the data set without having them buy into it. So it is a challenging space, but needed. And so these creative ways to help fund and support that sales force can be really valuable.
Donna, you also have some experience in this space, so I'd love you to speak a little bit more to, your unique experience and the sort of some of the learnings that came from it.
Sure. So to be really quick here, I think that we've talked a lot about the importance of clinical validation, product development, and managing the regulatory risks that's there, which is all true. But that's not the end all be all, because there's two other big pieces I see that have tripped up a lot of pediatric device companies. And that is around generating the necessary evidence to go to payers to persuade them, especially since in Juan's opening presentation, we already see that reimbursement for pediatric device and services is already suboptimal, right? And the second piece of it is, how are you generating the appropriate KOL advocacy and support to embed this in the guidelines? Otherwise, why and how do you educate and almost market to the clinicians, right, that you should be using this appropriately? So I would say thinking with the end in mind from even the very beginning is going to be super important. I see, especially with a lot of technical founders, that those are viewed as commercial sales readiness types of activities. So that's deprioritized to the very end. But guess what? Even if you get through the FDA and you're ready to go sell, but you don't have your the reimbursement ready, or at least the evidence ready, and also you don't have official KOL advocacy there, you're not going to get very far. And that goes back to Alex's point on why you're not seeing that commercial uptake as well. So I'd strongly recommend pushing those at least initial planning activities much, much further up as you're also developing the regulatory strategy as well.
Just quickly, don't be something that you're not, or don't try to be something that you're not. There's no point or benefit in hiding a small market opportunity that you may have in front of you. Own that. And investors, you'll find the right investor and you'll find the right group and you'll raise the appropriate amount of money all to go after that. If you try to be something that you're not, it creates a lot of challenges here. And so just.
Thank you for that. So I'd love to open up the conversation to the audience. We have a few minutes left for some questions from you all. So if you would like to ask a question, feel free to come up to the podium and briefly tell us a bit about who you are, and limit yourself to one question, please.
Don't all come down at one time.
I'll pitch in as our mic runner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Espinoza.
Hi, my name is Nan McDonald. I'm from the Institute for AI in Medicine here at Northwestern. My question is, as we think about AI, a lot of the foundation is around the data. And I'm wondering if you, like as you are investing in these companies, like what's the role of like the underlying data that they're producing? Like how does that play into your decisions?
So we actually see data as a currency. There is a significant amount of value in that. And one of the questions we ask ourselves, excuse me, during the due diligence process is, one, what is the quality of the data? What's the integrity of the data? Can it be consolidated in a way that is usable? And if those things can be achieved, then who ultimately is going to want that data? And when we think about the data, one of the things that we as a firm have, and I say this with all due humility, we've evolved into, is that when we invest in a product or we invest in data sets or information or what have you, if the data works in Boston and it works in Chicago, for example, or parts of Chicago, but it doesn't work in rural parts of the United States or in developing economies in Africa or Asia or the Middle East, then what are we actually doing here? Are we not creating a greater divide that already exists? So we have actually required a level playing field with our investments that if somebody can demonstrate that the product works here, great. But then you also need to talk about how you're going to make it work in other markets as well. And getting it to work in other markets also means how they're going to be able to get the data necessary to help improve the diagnosis, treatment planning, and ultimately care outcomes for those patients. So it is critical. The hard part with AI, as in anything in pediatrics, is there's a bit of an unknown of how to actually get it to be used. And I think, personally speaking, we as a firm are struggling with that balance. That being said, our first investment is an AI company dealing with autism. And so even though we struggle with it, we do realize that there is, we're in essence paying it forward for the great opportunity that's there.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I think we have time for another question if anyone has one. Alrighty. Do any of you have any more comments on the last question?
Sure, just quickly, I'll hammer that in. It's critically important. I think time is your most limited resource, and you can't go back and get data. And so the faster you can collect it, the earlier you can start that clock from a clinical and economic benefit, the better for you.
And then my quick piece of it is I think there's a lot of talk about the volume, and I'll just double click on the quality of data point that everyone's talking about here. So we've talked to a lot of AI companies where they look at, oh, look at X million images we have from whatever partner, right? That's great. But then when you ask, but well, what's the quality of your longitudinal data, right? You're looking at all these different things, but how are you mapping it up? Or are these just literally scattered data points everywhere that you can't connect? How do you properly not only diagnose, but prognosticate and predict in the future as well? So I think it's not just about scrapping up pieces of data, but making sure it's of use in longitudinal nature as well.
Madison, I'll just add from the health system side, I think it's imperative to think about what you're doing with the data and how you're protecting it. I know for a lot of health systems, Lori, Comer, Kaiser included, sharing that data is something that we are all very careful and protective of. So it's what do you need, what's critical data that you need, and what's data that you don't need, and being discerning when you approach those health systems for partnership.
Thank you for that, Alex. And to all of our panelists, we really appreciate you sharing your perspective. And if anyone has any more questions or wants to continue the conversation, feel free to come find any of us during the happy hour. But I do not want to hold you from your weekend. So I think we'll end the panel there. Thank you.